have Dr. Sid here with me, and he is a clinical psychologist. He's licensed in the state of New Jersey. Would you like to add anything else?
Just that I've been in practice now for several decades. I consider myself blessed that I still love the work I do. And my practice is a mixture of psychotherapy plus life coaching.
I know we said we're going to talk about relationships today. How do we know when we're in love, or it's just chemicals, or infatuation? So how do we know? How can we distinguish?
I think that's a very important question. I get asked that a lot by my clients, people in my personal life. So let me go a couple of steps with it. First of all, you already, Niyanta, brought up the word infatuation, and I think that's really important to immediately bring into the mix. And you already brought up the idea of chemicals and the intertwining of chemicals with infatuation. So I think what needs to be sort of an automatic perspective or mindset that people need to go into dating with, and any age, I don't think age it matters here at all, is the mindset that in order to build a truly foundational love relationship, and I'm going to expand on what I really mean by foundational in a moment, to build a truly foundational love relationship, I think everybody logically knows takes time. But when I talk about time, it's kind of an arbitrary figure that I'm going to put out here, but I really believe no way is it anything truly foundational in less than a minimum of 6 months, and really more in the category of at least a year. So sure, in an initial few months, there may be, if you feel an initial really good connection to somebody and vice versa, there certainly can be a good amount of time you may spend together reasonably early on, and feeling like something really positive is building here. But what I really mean by foundational love is to take a feeling that you may label or identify as love early on, but it's not by any means, chances are, foundational. Because what I really mean by foundational, what I kind of preach a lot and I've learned to practice in my own personal life, foundational love is built on the foundation of several things under the heading of mutual and two-way. So what I mean by mutual and two-way, there needs to be, for it to really be a solid foundation and therefore really true solid love, two-way respect, two-way trust, two-way comfort, two-way specialness, and as much as anything, two-way shared values. The foundation needs to include all those pieces: two-way trust, two-way respect, two-way comfort, two-way specialness, and two-way, again, a sense of there being a true bond and true depth to the relationship.
Thank you for repeating all of those.
Time.
So I do, because you said a lot and a lot of incredible things, and I do want to make sure that we go over a few things. So first of all, 6 months to a year. I'm sorry, but 2 weeks in, people say, "I love you." I was one of those people. Yes, I've been with my partner for 12 years now, or 13 years. So we've somehow made it work, but I think literally, maybe, I don't even remember, this was such a long time ago, but and I was also very young. Like a week or two into it, we're in love. So that's extremely difficult to go 6 months or a year. But I understand what you're saying. Even though these feelings are coming up, to actually be mindful or cognizant of the fact that, okay, other things might come up. Let me be patient. Let me now bring in my logical brain, and let me not commit to anything long term, as in maybe you don't want to get married before 6 months. To be mindful that, okay, this is what's going on with me right now. It could be infatuation, could be a lot like chemicals at play. Let me see it through. Let me be a little logical. And I think that's doable. I think that we can be in love and be logical at the same time. I don't think that's too much to ask. Do you mind me asking, what was your relationship like? Was it something that you were aware of when you met your partner? What was your process like?
Actually, I am more than willing to share what my experience has been. I just got married 3 years ago.
Congratulations. Aww.
Thank you. And I want to take that right to how we built our relationship. And I can tell you, Niyanta, what we practice is what I've basically just preached here. Okay. We felt certainly a strong attraction to each other on different levels pretty early on within the first few months. However, partly because, we are older at this point, but not just because of that. We both came into this relationship, as many people do, with baggage. There are a lot of people who enter into relationships with different kinds of baggage, and there's obviously different kinds. So for some people, it could be unresolved trauma. For some people, it could be unresolved feelings of a lot of emotional pain over a previous breakup, a divorce, whatever it may be. There can be grief issues. Somebody is still grieving, not necessarily the end of a previous relationship, but some significant loss, death. All of those factors can really be reasons why you need to take time. For my wife and I, her name is Debbie, what Debbie and I realized is I had entered into this relationship it had been a really long time that I had been in a potentially foundational relationship. I had had some experiences in relationships before that just did not have good endings. Debbie, on the other hand, came from a place where she had a marriage that really didn't work very well at all for a long time. So the marriage had ended a few years, certainly before we got involved. But she was now, and a couple of relationships she had after did not work very well. So when we first met, we were both coming from a place where we knew that as much as we felt an initial attraction, we needed to be cautious. We needed to take our time to slowly but surely build things, while at the same time, there were certainly some very good things going on. There was certainly a physical chemistry. We immediately realized, we had a good sense of humor in common, a lot of laughs. We had shared interests. So there were things that were clearly what were big, parts of the appeal for us to be moving forward and to lean into wanting to move forward. But on the other hand, because we both had issues that we knew we still needed to address and work out, we took our time. And that's why I kind of preach as much as 6 months to a year, because that's exactly what I practiced.
It's not unromantic to take your time. Just because you're being a little logical doesn't mean that it's not romantic. It doesn't have to be hot and heavy in the sense where you're being reckless with your own emotions, with your own psychological safety. I think that is so important, more than anything else, to get into a relationship that's psychologically safe. And you're right, it takes time to get a feel for what is this space, what is this emotional space that has been created with when two people come together. People can do awful things to each other, and I don't mean just physically, I mean emotionally, the things that you can't see, like the insidious hidden things that takes a long time to come out. And yeah, it can absolutely affect your quality of life. It can make you sick if you're in a not healthy relationship, if you're not in a psychologically safe space. And I know you also mentioned baggage that two people can bring into a relationship, and that's a real thing. If you meet at a older age, I guess the baggage would be previous relationships. But even if you meet someone, if you're younger, and if you meet someone at a younger age, I also think there's baggage of family and intergenerational trauma, and all that you've seen, all that has been shown to you about what a relationship is, what a relationship isn't. You carry that on. And sometimes I don't think people are aware what is theirs and what is not theirs. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit about that? When these feelings come up, you're flooded with these emotions, let's say in a relationship, and you think your partner is the enemy, but some of that is baggage. Some of that doesn't belong to the relationship. It's not created by your relationship. How do you distinguish? how do you become aware of that?
Well, words like being authentic, being transparent, we all know those words. And they usually talked about in terms of being those types of ways towards someone else. I think it's every bit as important that we be as authentic and transparent and mindful with ourselves. That's part of what I think can really create complications, can create misgivings, can create unrealistic expectations. We have to be honest with ourselves about whether there are things going on that we're feeling reluctant about. We'll get to, talking about red flags that really can be spillover, as you just said, Niyanta, from previous relationships. We really need to stay totally honest with ourselves about whatever it is that's going on, that we're feeling misgivings about a partner, that we're starting to feel like we're drifting away. And yet we could, whether if not consciously, then subconsciously, we're being triggered. We're being triggered by something our partner's doing or not doing. It could be individual isolated moments. It could be a pattern. But if we are being triggered inside, it's possible that what we're being triggered about is a very real red flag about a partner that really should be grounds for us at least stepping back, if not possibly exiting the relationship. But there are enough instances in which, on the other hand, there could be something our partner is saying or doing that isn't really something that's intolerable, isn't something that is in any way abusive or anything of the sort, but it's triggering unresolved previous baggage that, by being honest with ourselves, we have to recognize it's not just that the relationship needs work. It's not just that the partner needs work. We need to still do some work on ourselves.
Yes to that, right? To say, what am I doing, before you can go into talking to your partner about what they're doing. So what do you think is the best way to be honest with yourself? Is it journaling? Is it talking to somebody else? What do you think works?
Actually, Niyanta, I think everything you just listed are the things that people need to do. Journaling is certainly one option. I'm a very big advocate of people journaling. I once heard a description of a journal. I've quoted it ever since then. A journal, in a sense, is like the perfect confidant. You get to say whatever you want, share the most personal, private feelings that you can have, and there's no consequences. Nobody's judging you. Nobody's looking at you in a way that can somehow make you feel like there's something you're saying that's wrong or bad. Sure, it's not a live person, but it is a way. If you're feeling vulnerable feelings, and for a lot of people, it's hard to share vulnerable feelings. So here's a way to share them in a journal where it can also be cathartic. It's a great way to let out the emotions that you may be on some level squelching. So for sure, journaling is one option. Sure, therapy is an option. I mean, we can make that a given. But you also made reference to, just let's go with the words, talking to someone. One of the greatest blessings I believe anybody can have, whether it's a close friend, maybe it's a relative, is to have at least one person in your life who isn't just somebody you're close to, but they shoot straight with you. And they shoot straight with you from a place in their heart. It's not just that there's somebody who's a straight shooter, and half the time straight shooters of this world are saying things they don't realize. They can sound insensitive. They can almost sound like they don't really care. They're just shooting from the hip. To have somebody in your life that you're close to who shoots straight, but you know it's coming from their heart, you know that they have your best interest in heart. And when you share something that you're dealing with, say with a romantic partner, and what, for example, they may challenge you on by shooting straight with you is getting you to look at, where are you taking or not taking accountability? Because one of the things I think that happens so often in so many relationships, whether it's early on or later on, is we look at what our partner is doing or not doing where they're not taking any accountability. Now, if I may, let me quickly add a piece to that. There's a lot out there that's talked about in certainly in therapist offices, but certainly on social media, about being in a relationship with somebody who's a narcissist. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go real far with that right now because I'm sure you're right. It could be a whole subject by itself.
Oh yeah.
But just to say one or two quick things on it. Part and parcel of what a narcissist is about, amongst different things, they're not going to take accountability for how they're hurting you or gaslighting you or whatever they may be doing. So if you are or someone is in a romantic relationship with a narcissist, you cannot expect them. You can't sit around and wait for them to start taking accountability because they're not going to. That to me is a given. But putting aside being in a love relationship with somebody who's a narcissist, in a more, I'll call it, typical relationship, if you're going to expect and want and need your partner to take accountability, to have a really foundational love relationship, you have to take it upon yourself and commit to you taking accountability. What are you contributing to problems in the relationship where you're not just shifting the focus or blame onto your partner? If both people are willing and committed to taking accountability for problems and issues that arise, that's part of what foundational love is. Both people taking accountability and both people committing to addressing the issues together.
Right. And I love how you mentioned how there's an exception. If you're in a relationship with a narcissist, obviously that person is not going to take accountability. So it can't be you just taking accountability, you blaming yourself. Do you think that's what people end up doing? They take so much accountability that they blame themselves, because the narcissist in a relationship is definitely not going to take accountability for anything.
Well, that is what can complicate not just being in a relationship with a narcissist, but staying. The real issue, people can talk about, how did you get in this relationship, or in so many words, didn't you see this? The issue is staying. If you continue to stay in a relationship with somebody who you are clearly identifying as a narcissist, well, part of what accountability is about in that situation is you need to be totally honest with yourself. What are the needs? What needs of yours are somehow still being met by staying in this relationship? Because just as a little aside, Niyanta, I'm not going to only for the moment address relationships where the other person's a narcissist. Just to, let's say, broaden the focus a bit. Staying in a relationship with somebody who may not necessarily be a narcissist, but is abusive.
Yeah.
And we all know there are way too many relationships, love relationships at any age, where a partner is abusive. And they could even be both, abusive and a narcissist, certainly. And yet, you, the person who's feeling so unhappy, so dissatisfied, continues to stay in the relationship. So on the surface, it looks like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? But the issue of needs is really the bottom line. If you stay in a relationship with somebody who's a narcissist and or abusive, even if, as unhappy as you may be, there have to be certain needs of yours that are being met. So, for example, for some people, there is a need to not be alone, to not be without a relationship. For some people, there's a need that could be financial, where as much as you are as unhappy as you are, as much as you get so hurt and so angry at being mistreated, but if the reality is you are not in a financial position, particularly, of course, if we're talking a marriage, and there is that much more, of course, commitment, there are enough situations where you may not be able to extricate yourself because there's too much financial dependence. So that's another possible reason people stay, in spite of the fact that they are so unhappy. Just to throw one more into the mix, sometimes, and you were hinting at, Niyanta, the idea that some partners can blame themselves for what, somehow it's their fault. I'm not saying enough. I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not being loving enough, whatever. When that comes into the mix, what is unbelievable to me at times to see, but I have seen, and probably we all see, is you can end up feeling guilty for hurting the narcissistic or abusive partner by leaving them, as though you're doing something bad to them. no matter how badly they've already treated you. So those are just some examples of needs. The need to not be alone, to the need that could be there financially, the need to not want to hurt the other person, again, no matter how much they've hurt you. That's why, or some examples anyway, of why people can stay with a narcissist, stay with somebody abusive, even though everybody else around you may be thinking, my God, you've got to get out.
Yeah. Do you think you could also be the need to validate your own belief about yourself? Or if you have a belief that you're unworthy and you're in a relationship where that's validated, do you think that's also a need?
It's a great point you bring up, Niyanta. The validation piece definitely is there at times. What I want to do is take that word validation and I want to slightly sort of tweak it a bit into the word deserve. And the word deserve, I think, is a word that's really underestimated in terms of how complex it is.
That is much more powerful. The minute you said deserve, it became so much more bigger than just validation.
So if I can, then great, because if that resonates for you, then let me take it another step. So I wrote a book, and I'm not here to pitch this book, but I just want to make reference to it.
Yes, please do.
Okay. So it's called Your Self-Sabotaging Inner Bully, standing up to it once and for all. But the key part is your self-sabotaging inner bully. So one of the main things that I talk about in this book, obviously with the word self-sabotage, it's addressed in the book. The term inner bully is the term that I use. I believe we all have this part of us inside in our subconscious. It starts building early on in life where that part of our subconscious that I arbitrarily call the inner bully. Could be called the inner critic, dark side, shadow. There's different terms for it. But this inner bully part of us is what can steer us to actually believe, sadly, actually believe inside that we don't deserve better, that we don't deserve to have a partner that will treat us with real respect, that will be the partner that really will work with us to build truly a foundational relationship, that never in a million years would mistreat us, never in a million years would be abusive. That inner bully negative force causing the sabotage of staying with somebody who may be abusive, it takes a lot of self-work, first even to recognize that you're up against this inner bully part of you. And then it really takes a lot of work to really come to see the inner bully is twisting the truth. You most certainly deserve better. You most certainly deserve to be happy. And you most certainly never, ever in your lifetime deserve to be mistreated the way you're being mistreated.
Yeah. I think what I'm getting out of this is to have compassion. I think for yourself, first of all, if you're in one of these relationships, or if you see someone who has chosen to stay, to not be so quick to judge, because yes, of course, like we judge as human beings. So what I'm really just getting out of it is to have compassion. That life is way more complicated. Relationships can be way more complicated. Human beings can be way more complicated.
I think it's great you brought in compassion, because if there are needs, like I was saying, if there are needs being met, as much as you wish that the needs weren't as strong, again, whether it's to not be alone, financial guilt, whatever it is, if those needs are there and you're being perfectly honest with yourself that you have these perfectly human needs, that's why you're staying. It really does call for you having compassion for yourself, because there are certain needs being met.
Right. And that's the first step, right? Who knows what the second step could be? When you really bring in compassion for yourself and self-love, who knows what the second step might be? If you're guided by self-love and compassion for yourself, who knows what the second step might be? But I think that the foundation, the first step, the bare minimum is just loving yourself.
It really also, I think people sometimes lose sight of how much courage it can take to extricate yourself from a bad relationship. It's one of the most courageous things somebody could do.
I agree. I agree. When you're leaving a relationship, you're leaving an identity behind. And a loss of identity feels like death. I've felt this not in my relationship. I felt this in my career. I was pursuing something and that was my entire identity. And the minute I stopped, it felt like an identity death. I was lost for an entire year. And it's really confusing. How I describe it is like being inside a dark room and you can't find the light switch. That can be psychologically very unsettling. And I understand, like, if you've been in a relation for a really long time, that does become your identity.
And just to take that one more step and recognizing if you're making a major transition in your life, be it out of a love relationship, be it a job shift, a career shift, to stay with the idea of identity, part of that transition is there is a loss. You mentioned, Niyanta, that there was part of your experience was to feel lost. Well, feeling lost involves there was a loss. And part of what happens for any kind of major transition where there is a loss is there can be a period of grieving. And it may look different, and it is different certainly than, let's say, grieving over the death of a loved one. But it doesn't matter because any major loss, there is room for grieving. And that's just a perfectly human part of making any major transition.
Absolutely. Now, I want to go into the red flags, what you call intolerable red flags and then tolerable red flags. Can you tell us the difference between the two?
Sure. The key to making that distinction is to recognize that each person will have a different tolerance level for what it is about a partner that's not easy to live with. And that may be putting it mildly. So I kind of start with the idea that the idea of a red flag is there's something about your partner that's not easy to live with. And it may even be, it's actually pretty difficult to live with. However, what each person decides is a tolerable red flag versus intolerable is up to each person. So let me take a couple of examples. Let's suppose you discover your partner has some kind of addiction. For some people, that's an automatic, intolerable red flag, no discussion, black and white, I'm out of here. On the other hand, for some people, sure, you don't want to be dealing with a partner who has an addiction, but let's suppose partner with the addiction acknowledges they have an addiction. They're not in denial. They're not avoiding anything. They're not causing any kind of major destructiveness to themselves or anyone else. That they actually acknowledge not just that they have an addiction, but they acknowledge they need help. So what could be an automatic red flag for other people, the fact of addiction, may not be an intolerable red flag for someone else. It's up to each person what it is you are willing to tolerate versus what you're not willing to tolerate. So addiction would be one example. Another example that comes to mind is somebody who has a temper. And I don't mean a temper in terms of automatically crosses the line, into physical abuse, or just is prone to getting intensely angry at times. So for one person, that may be, again, outright intolerable. Particularly, let's say for argument's sake, you grew up in a home in which there was a lot of uncontrolled anger being thrown around. So if your own childhood experience was, I do not want to be reminded of what I bore witness to when I was growing up, then somebody who seems to have an anger management problem, it's an intolerable red flag. On the other hand, for someone else, again, sure, they're not really feeling very good about their partner appearing to have some anger management issues. But again, same kind of thing I was saying about addiction. If the partner has some anger issues, but they acknowledge it, they're willing to address it, then it really may not be anything that's intolerable.
That temper, that's a intolerable red flag for me. I agree with everything that you said, especially if you grew up in a household where emotions were not really regulated. Can you speak about also some tolerable red flags?
So two things come to mind there, just as two examples. So let's suppose you have a partner who talks about some of their ambitions. some of their goals in life. And the ambitions or goals that they express could be career related, could be relationship related, could be about having kids, whatever it is you like. The ambitions or goals they're expressing appeal to you. They just feel like they really resonate for you. However, let's suppose the person is not very good at follow through. So they talk a good game, they talk about what it is that's important to them, but they're at best, say, inconsistent about follow through, and at worst, they really don't follow through. Their actions don't match their words. So for probably safe to say for most people, that's at least to some degree a red flag. But if, again, kind of like I was alluding to before, if the person recognizes it, is mindful, is being totally honest with themselves, and they work on practicing matching their actions with their words, then it can stay a tolerable red flag. So that's one example. Another example I'm going to put is on the financial front. So if you have a partner, and let's say your need is to, and understandably, as it would be a perfectly human need, to feel financially as secure as possible. Yes. You don't necessarily have to have a partner who's outright wealthy, but certainly you want to feel a degree of financial security. Well, let's suppose your partner is somebody who, they may have a steady job, certainly, they may earn at least a pretty good income, but let's just say for argument's sake, they're an overspender, or they're not very good at saving money. Well, that obviously can, at least potentially anyway, sabotage financial security. If what you feel, though, is that whatever degree of sabotaging of security is taking place doesn't feel to you to be extreme, it doesn't feel to you that you're feeling unsafe, that you're feeling like you're actually in financial jeopardy, that could be an example of a tolerable red flag. There's a degree of financial security, but there's issues where potentially it could be sabotaged.
And so if you have gotten into a relationship and let's say the tolerable red flags, you're seeing tolerable red flags, which I think you can also call disappointments, right? They're nothing major. They're just disappointments. Like, oh, I thought my partner was a certain way, but he's not. Or the other way around too. I thought my partner was a certain way, but she's not. And so a certain disappointment can set in. And what happens when you are not honest with yourself about being disappointed with your partner? Because for some people, being in love and loving someone and being disappointed might not go together.
If you don't acknowledge it, I would say, Niyanta, what you're virtually guaranteed to have happen inside of you is it's going to fester. Whether you're conscious of it or not, it's going to fester into resentment.
Yes,
it's going to fester in.
That's the word that came up. I was like, this sounds like it could go into resentment. Please continue.
And just to take that one more step, if the resentment does fester inside, it's going to likely go one of two directions in terms of the relationship, and either one back to sabotage is going to sabotage the relationship sooner or later. So it's either going to go, I would just sum it up as inward versus outwards. If your resentment goes inwards and you try to squelch it, all that's going to do inside is create a lot more stress, a lot more agitation. It can even lead you to withdraw. It can lead to depression because you're squelching it, you're forcing it in, and that resentment is just going to eat away at you inside. And that's potentially going to sabotage the relationship. But now let's turn the tables. Let's look at what happens if you mainly go outwards with it. If you're going outwards with it, the odds are it means that you're going to be and demonstrating that resentment. You're going to be irritable. You're going to come out sounding attacking. You may at times become belittling. All of those kind of behaviors are clearly going to, potentially anyway, be destructive for the relationship. And it's because you've allowed that resentment to fester and not get the two of you on board to deal together with resentments that could be a two-way street. So the resentment's going to go either in or it's going to go out, and either way the relationship could be in trouble.
Wow. Yeah. And so if someone has found themselves in a place where there's a lot of disrespect, there's a lot of belittling, there's a lot of emotional abuse in that sense. So first of all, would you call that emotional abuse?
I would call it emotional abuse if that's how it feels.
Okay.
Again, back to just the words tolerable and intolerable. As I think we both know, Niyanta, there are people who will tolerate a lot of what other people will never tolerate. So for some people, the tolerance level may stay in place long enough so that months go by, years go by, the same behaviors are still taking place, but you're continuing to tolerate it. For other people, it may be quite the opposite. That early on, maybe, allowing a couple of months or whatever, arbitrarily speaking, of feeling that you're being disrespected, of feeling as though you're being mistreated. For some people, it's going to take a lot less time to say that is intolerable. Either we really work on things or you really work on yourself or I'm done.
And do you think there's a way forward if a relationship has gotten to a place where there's disrespect, belittling? Or is there a way forward, or at that point is it best to just call it quits?
I'm a very strong advocate, and not just because I'm in this field. I'm a very strong advocate. If people still feel there's a genuine love there, but there really are some major problems in the relationship, like some of what you just listed, before you exit, and certainly, as a little aside, before you cross any lines into cheating or infidelity, that what you agree to do is go for relationship counseling. It doesn't guarantee the relationship's going to work out, no. But on the other hand, I always tell people, if at minimum you go for some counseling, you feel you're in the hands of the right counselor or therapist for you, that you'll always be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, at least I gave it a shot, at least we gave it a shot. With, of course, the best case scenario being that it actually does turn things around, that both people take accountability, that both people are honest with their disappointments and their resentments. It gets addressed in the hands of a competent counselor or therapist, and lo and behold, it can turn the whole thing around into something both people really want and really deserve as a really good relationship.
There's genuine love there. That part is so important, because I believe in relationships. I'm married. My husband is such a big part of my life. My relationship is a big part of my life. And I have learned about myself through my relationship. Also, I've also grown individually, obviously, but I've also grown a lot just by being in a relationship, by learning how to coexist with another human being. It's made me more mature. It's made me a woman. And I love what you said, that if there's genuine love there, these little things can be worked on. These little things can be figured out. And I say little things, and it might not seem like little things in the moment, right? They all seem like huge, big things that could end your relationship any moment. And I get it. But if there's genuine love there, to not throw in the towel, to give it a chance, to hang on a little longer, or we all have the option of leaving anytime. I mean, this day and age, no one is really, okay, I don't want to say no one, but most of us are financially independent. Most are. Most of us that I know, like most people that I know in my circle, my family, my friends, we're all independent. We don't really need anybody. I want to be in my relationship. And I'm going to say it again because it is so beautiful. If there's genuine love there, to just try, maybe go to counseling, to see what else is there that you're not seeing.
And the only thing I'd add to that is it also goes under the heading of the word commitment. Because if you're genuinely committed, not just you feel the love and that's really great, but part of what a solid foundational relationship is about is the commitment to work things out, to at least, again, attempt to. And fulfilling that commitment and doing that work, if it wasn't necessarily genuine foundational love, this increases the chance that it could become that.
Well, there's still so much that I want to talk about, but I know our time is coming to an end. is there anything you would like to add? I know you talked about your book. Would you mind repeating the title one more time and where people might be able to find it? And also anything else that you'd like to add?
Okay, so the book is called Your Self-Sabotaging Inner Bully. And again, as a subtitle, standing up to it for once and for all. But that's the main part is Your Self-Sabotaging Inner Bully. It's on Amazon and Kindle. It's not yet an audiobook, but I'm getting there. Mm-hmm. And the only other thing I just want to mention is in the last couple of years, I have expanded my personal private practice into the realm of psychological life coaching. Mm. And just very quickly, that life coaching that I do is especially relationship oriented, and it is especially geared towards a very specific topic that a lot of people can experience. I call it betrayal trauma, where unfortunately at some point in a relationship, and it can also happen in the workplace, not just love relationships, where you discover you've been betrayed. Your partner or someone else who is in some relationship with you, you discover they've done something that you're terribly hurt by, they've betrayed you, and there are instances in which it can become outright traumatizing. That has been one of the main areas that has been part of the psychological life coaching that I do. So just mentioning betrayal trauma, and I also I do coaching around anger and stress management, just as some other examples, but it is especially relationship oriented, and just wanted to mention that.
Right, and so this is life coaching, as in anybody can work with you. They don't have to be in New Jersey. People can contact you from all over the country, obviously.
Yes. Okay. I have had several clients. It's done virtually and it works out fine. Okay. Yes. And if I could just quickly mention one other area, I also do life coaching. I had written another book about self-sabotage related specifically to weight loss, whole complicated subject by itself. And that's just one other area.
Oh, that sounds incredible. So betrayal trauma, if someone has gone through cheating in a relationship and they don't really know whether they want to move forward, how to stay in the relationship, if they're choosing to do that, they're not, they haven't gotten to a place where there's forgiveness, or they're not able to get themselves to forgive, or even if that's the right thing for them. And if they're in that place where there's a lot of confusion, to find you.
Yes, all the above you just said is spot on. And the issue can be, can you heal? Can you heal, particularly if the other person at least not just sincerely apologize, because we all know apologies necessarily don't mean anything, but carries through on making amends to you? Do they really try to make sure that they're going to do their share of accountability to try to heal, if you're even open to healing at that point, or like you said, if you're even open to trying to forgive?
Right. And so if people want to reach you directly, is there like an Instagram, or how do you prefer to be contacted?
Probably best would be by email. Okay. I have my professional email address. It's drsidcohen, drsidcohen, all lowercase, no spaces, @gmail.
Okay, so that's drsidcohen @gmail.com. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we can have another conversation, because there's a lot that I didn't get into. There's so much that came up. You said so many incredible things, and I wanted to go into it, and we went in so many different directions, but it was all incredible, and would love to have another conversation with you if you are open to it. And thank you.
Absolutely open to that. Anytime, get in touch and we'll make it happen.
All right.